So when we talk about combining brand and UX into one seamless process, we're really talking about this as a larger process. Really, what that looks like is we start with research. Both really rely on research, both brand and UX. And so we want to do that research together, have a combined research process to do all of that at the same time and have consistent data that drives both that brand and UX strategies going forward. We then go into recommendations for the brand, looking at what those brand recommendations are. How are you positioning yourself? What is your messaging? Establish that before moving on to the UX recommendations. Establish how that applies to a website, an app, whatever digital experience it is that you're looking at the user experience of. And then go into your standard kind of redesign process if we're looking at this from a website redesign perspective. Go into a combined design phase, incorporating all of that great research that's already come into it. Then build a website. Launch the website. Now, the reason why we think that this approach is so valuable, if you're looking at both brand and UX at the same time, is again, because of that research phase being done together. Really, that is sort of the key moment where all of the pieces can be used together and come together. Both of these involve research, and it's very similar research at the end of the day. Both brand and UX will do typically some sort of a user study, whether that's done through surveys of users going out to learn about their experience on the website and things like, and how they interact with the brand. Also possibly done through focus groups where you get a group of people into a room, either physically or virtually, and you ask them questions about that experience. You might do one-on-one interviews, whatever we can do to get that perspective from users about how it is to work with you and also how it is to interact with your website. Both brand and UX will also typically take time to look at your competitors, how they're positioning themselves, what their websites look like. And by doing that together at the same time, you can again get a more comprehensive look at what your competitors are doing and get a better understanding of the industry as a whole from a holistic viewpoint, not just from one siloed approach. In addition, both brand and UX are looking at the content on your website. Brand from more of a messaging perspective of how you're positioning yourself to a larger audience, and UX from more of a functional perspective. How is that content helping to drive people through your website or helping from an SEO perspective to get people into your website? Where that research differs kind of ties into the larger focuses of these two areas. On the brand side, you're typically also doing some sort of a market or larger industry research to see how the company fits in within the larger context of the industry, what the overall market is trending, and things like that. That will help to get, again, the larger picture of how the brand is established within their industry and markets. On the UX side, we're looking at things like the actual performance of the website, what pages people are going to, how long they're staying on pages, what they're interacting with. On the same side, we're looking at things like heat maps, which show hot and cold zones and where people are clicking on pages or how far down the page they're scrolling. We're also looking at search engine optimization, how Google is treating the website. So again, we're looking at it more from a web perspective versus a larger brand perspective. But so much of that research is done by both groups and is really very similar at the end of the day. We always start with brand recommendations because it's a great baseline that we can build off of. It's who you are, how you're trying to represent yourself, what's the personality you're going to give forward, how are you positioning yourself within the industry and among competitors, who are you and what are you trying to, how are you trying to showcase yourself within the market to your customers? And we really need to know that before we can go over and start building a website. Before we can establish what that content is, how those pages are laid out, we need to know who you are and what it is that you want to accomplish from a larger perspective. So having the research and taking the time to make those recommendations really only helps the user experience of a website because we have such a solid foundation to base that on. The reason why we think this is such a valuable thing to consider is that it makes a very consistent approach based on data, based on consistent data, based on in-depth data, because we're taking the time to look at it from multiple perspectives. It really does just create a better end products, both digitally on your websites, but also just holistically across your entire marketing efforts.